So I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we'll open it up to our audience. Jordan, did you set out to make a father-son story?
No. When I came back to make this film, I thought I would make a film about the world of shouting that I loved and had left behind. And when I heard it was dying, it kind of hit me like harder than I thought it would. And I knew that I had to come home, but it was really only until when my father said, "You left me," when we were filming a scene in his office, that I began to realize I had a lot more that I'd left behind than just the trading pit. And that's when it began.
Do you think if your father knew it was going to be a father-son story, he would have agreed to make this film?
Not a chance. Or he would have been very guarded.
From the start?
Yeah, I think so.
So this, at least unconsciously, this was a good way to get him involved.
I think I must have had an unconscious sense when I went back that I had to deal with the issues with my father. But if you would have asked me back then, I would have said, no, I really want to make a film about the trading pit. And I thought it would take me a year, and I would just go back to this narrative world of filmmaking that I had been in, fiction filmmaking, and boy, was I in for a rude awakening. 10 years later.
Wow. Did you learn something, or what can you tell us that you learned about your father through the making of the film that you didn't already know?
I think that for me, my father was more of a myth when I was growing up and when I was away, and I saw him as this legend in Chicago, but more so than my father. So that award ceremony scene at the beginning of the film, like that's how I saw my father up on the stage. So by making this film, I could, not that we resolved all of our issues, but I could see him as a man and understand how he came to be, how his character was formed. And it really changed my understanding of him completely.
And how about, what did you learn about yourself through the making of the film?
Well, it went through stages, you know. First I had to come to grips with the extent to which I had been in his shadow growing up and question whether my film career was an attempt to outdo my old man. You know, was I born to be a filmmaker, or was this a way that I could do something bigger than him? And I'd never questioned that, but I had to question it along the way. And then I had to question my own place in this equation and how much anger I may have held on to for reasons that you just hold on to anger, and how much of it, you know. And so it was an incredible journey. It changed me. And I did come to believe that this was, you know, I don't think I really fully was a filmmaker until I completed this film. Because otherwise I would have, I don't know, there was something about it that made me understand also myself. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of a healing that took place in some ways between your father and yourself, and for yourself internally. Yeah,
I don't think there's like a moment of epiphany. I don't think that I don't think that people change that dramatically. It's just sort of in the cracks that you feel a difference as a result of things. And in that sense, and I tried to express that in the film and not say, me and my dad, we're not going to have this huggy, crying moment of I love you, but I think the love is there.
Right. And when he saw it and the rest of your family saw it, what was their response to this film?
My dad didn't fully come around to it till he saw it with an audience, and then he felt very differently about it because he could distance himself and see it through the audience's eyes. And I think that he really came around to it. The only scene he wanted me to take out, he saw it before the premiere, and he wanted me to take out the scene where he walks out of the library.
What, like walks out on you?
Yeah, where he walks out during the filming, and during this, in the scene. And I struggled with that, but my editor and we felt that it was essential to the story.
Well, it's memorable. I saw the film months ago, and I still remember that scene. And I think you get more of a sense of who he is, that he's willing to do that, and how far he will go, and how far you will go. And how about your mom? What did she think of this?
My mom's been incredibly supportive. She's that kind of person, but I think she loves it. I think she's the one that told me privately, this film brought your father closer to you. And he would never say that to me, of course, but she said that to me, which was very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the differences for you, since you do both narrative and documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, I think that, I was filled with some grandiosity before I started, that somehow documentaries were easier, and I think it's the opposite. I think documentaries are a much more exacting form, because you're dealing with truth. You cannot capture the exact truth, because no documentary does. I've got a point of view, you're editing the film. But it forces you to extract emotional truth. And you cannot fall back on the fact that an actor delivers a line with such emotional subtext that it carries through a rough patch in the story. A documentary forces you to really get to the core of it. And then at the beginning, you have this giant 3-hour or 4-hour, with so many different stories. You have this piece of block, and you have to find the story and chisel down through it. Yeah, sure. So you have to break down through the story, and it was only for me with this film when I realized that the pit was a zero-sum game where there had to be a winner and a loser, and that it was exactly the same as my relationship with my father. And then I could make the film, because then the other pieces of the movie fell to the side, and I was left with the core.
This film is also about your career rise and fall, and now rise again. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how this film maybe helped you come out of that dark bottom you seem to have gone into?
Yeah, I think that I think that in some ways, I guess to grow, you have to get to the heart of the matter. And for me, in this film, I think the scene that's the heart of the matter is when we talk about me not going back to Bialystok when my father visited. And I think that the process of this film, in a way, for me, was getting to the heart of the matter, which will hopefully make me a much better director going forward. And then anytime what film, I don't know what film I'm going to make next. I have a few ideas that I'm developing and working on, but there's no way it can be as hard as this film. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be in it, and my father's not going to be in it, so that already is a victory. Though it may be a father-son story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of fathers and sons, I'd like to just bring in your grandfather, who was a socialist, who gives rise or gives birth to this ultra-capitalist, and where do you stand? Because you seem to kind of be on both ends of that.
Yeah, absolutely. My father and I don't talk politics, so that's off the, we're sort of far apart in that, except that he hates Donald Trump, so I really appreciate that. And did from the beginning, to his credit. So my grandfather was a huge influence on me, and you know, I had all that money, and it fills you with a sense of, you know, like you can do anything, even though it's false, but then there's an emptiness beneath it. But I thought it was amazing, and I had built a brownstone and renovated it and turned it into this, you know, whatever, you know, what I thought was a very beautiful place. And I brought my grandfather, my Zaidi, to see it. And I gave him a tour of the house, and, you know, was like hoping that he'd be proud of me. And my Zaidi said to me, well, I think you should charge admission. And it really, I have to say, you know, it was a core moment for me. It was like, it was eye-opening, and he influenced me in some way. I was already feeling that. So yeah, he cut right to the chase.
Yeah. Right to the heart of it.
Yeah.
Let's open it up to our audience. I'm sure there's a lot of questions for Jordan and his wonderful film.
Okay, one right here in the front.
I have a suggestion. If you ever remake that first short, that you should have the father not just play alone at night, but that he should wake his son up and demand that he come over and keep playing with him. You know, sort of that he's willing to ruin his son's health for the pursuit of this competition.
I'll bear that in mind. I appreciate that.
Okay, over here on your left.
It's really more of a comment, but your film hit a very universal trend in human nature, and that is when a son or a daughter tries to get the approval of their parent. I don't think there's anybody in the world who hasn't had that theme. I think that's part of the success of your movie, is that you hit on a very universal and human truth. And I loved your movie, and I encourage you. Also, one other thing is I've read a lot about children, adult children of very successful people, that it's quite a burden. Because how do you live up to the success of, let's say, an actor father who was, you know, top of their field, or a broker father, or whatever? So I think that you had an extra burden in life being the child of such a successful person, and that there's no way that would be an easy go.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your comments. I also had a lot of luck, too, and a lot of fortune, so. But I am glad I left that world behind.
Okay, here in the center.
Why do you think you didn't go back to Bialystok?
You know, I don't, it wasn't revenge. It's more that I was so driven to succeed. And in Hollywood, there's always this project over the horizon. You know, there's this famous film critic, Pauline Kael, who she said about Hollywood, Hollywood is the only place you can die of encouragement. And so it's true. And I probably had like a project on the horizon and a meeting and this and that, and it all feels so urgent, like it's about to come together. And I think that was part of it, and part of it was that I had really exiled myself from Chicago and my father's world, and so I was kind of removed from it. I just didn't grapple with it until I came home.
Okay, another question in the center.
I was wondering about any philanthropy. There was no mention of your father, who succeeded so well financially. Is he involved in any philanthropic efforts with the community?
Yeah, my father's very involved in education in Chicago and trying to change the education system. I don't know all of the specifics, but I know that he's actively involved. And just a side note that you should know, he built the exchange for no pay. He was chairman all those years for no pay. It was a non-public company, and there was no pay whatsoever. So what he made from trading, and he's had his share of losses too, but he has done some things to give back. Oh yeah, and he, my father grew up speaking Yiddish, and he also donates an incredible amount of time and money to the Holocaust Museum, to the YIVO. I don't know if you know that organization, the YIVO, but the Simon Wiesenthal Center, many Jewish organizations. And my Zaidi was involved before him, and he is very much involved. And in fact, he just spoke at the State Department where they presented a movie in honor of the Holocaust commemoration on Sugihara, Chine Sugihara, the Japanese diplomat who saved so many lives. So there was a feature, and my father spoke at the event, which was great.
Okay, another question in the center.
Thank you for making so revealing a movie. I found myself wanting to know more about the woman behind the man. Both, she was behind you all the time, it looked like, beautifully. It looked like she was behind her husband all the time, beautifully. What drove her, what made her happy other than cooking? Obviously, she was very proud of. And I don't mean to belittle that, I'm just curious.
I think my mother accepted her role from that generation as the woman behind the man and taking care of the home and the children and being there for my father. And if you call her on it, she will call you right back on it and say, I know what I bought into, and this is what I wanted, and this is what I lived. And my sister, of course, is the complete opposite. My sister was an attorney, and though she raised a family, she reinvented her life. Now she's a librarian at a public school, and yet my mother stands by it so strongly. And so that's, I think she did what she wanted.
Okay, a question over here on the far left.
Thanks very much for a great documentary of the Chicago mercantile world and its demise. I wanted to ask you a question about the man who seemed to be a narrator at the beginning, who had a guttural voice and was making the comparisons between medieval jousting and the zero-sum games of that period and this world. I thought he was a great choice, and I wonder if you could say any more about him.
Yeah, his name is Maury Kravitz. Rest in peace. He passed away somewhere during the editing period. He is a remarkable man. He was a trader. He left the pit, and he spent his fortune, or part of it, tracking down Genghis Khan, or he would say Genghis Khan. And there's a documentary made about his search for Genghis Khan's treasure. And I think he thought he was the reincarnation. Well, you can see, he looks like a Mongol warlord. And he would sit beneath a picture of Genghis Khan when I interviewed him. I mean, he really takes to heart, but he is incredibly eloquent. That's his theory about the pit. And he's a wonderful orator. That's almost, a lot of that's without editing, in the sense that when there's a line, he doesn't pause, he doesn't say he's just got that voice, and that voice, of course, came from the pit.
We have time for one more question.
So we have one over here on your right.
Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, do you regret at all turning down many of those opportunities that you were offered which subsequently led to your agent walking away. Do you think perhaps you were a little bit too choosy?
Hell yeah. Way too choosy. My agent told me that, take a stepping stone film.
Right.
There were offers. Take a film. It doesn't have to be perfect. You have to get your second feature under your belt. And I was hell bent on my next feature exploding the world, and I won't make that mistake again.
And the other thing is, do you know what has happened to all of those people who were working in the pit since 2015? What are they doing now with their lives?
Almost all of them could not make it on the computer, and you'll find them at working at Home Depot, driving Uber, some real estate, but basically these are, they are blue-collar guys who live by their instinct, and those who didn't make it big, or made it big and then lost it at the wrong time, are now, working in blue-collar jobs.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you for coming.